So you're very welcome to join the conversation. You can speak in French, in German, in Russian, in Austrian, and we'll try to um, accept it as your form of resistance to English. But we'll do it anyway in English for the most part. So thank you all for being here, and um, so. I wanted to start with very close to what we just saw, and I mean, obviously, it's for a very important part. It's not only a film about resistance, but it's also a film about literature and working with literature. And for me, one of the reasons why we wanted to frame it under the term of resistance was because we felt there was a very strong voice about against pessimism. So trying to resist actually something that might come with what you said in your work, which can come very easily lead into cynicism. So yeah, I'm very curious. Maybe it has something to do with your lecture of Chekhov and maybe also your own perspective on way to deal with cinema.
Well, the main thing for me in Chekhov is the mixture I find in his theater and in his short story, this extraordinary mixture of irony and compassion, both together, which is wonderful because just compassion is, well, when you know men, you cannot just be compassionate. Chekhov would say something like, they are so stupid, but they're so sad. So that would be Chekhov, and I found this mixture of compassion remarkable, and also it was at work in his life. Chekhov was a doctor. He, all his life, gave to the people around him, was preoccupied by the exploited, the imprisoned, and this is why maybe you have the feeling that when you're reading especially his short stories, that life is not very far away. Of course, when you're a doctor, it's not recommended to be a pessimist. But I don't think Chekhov was an optimist. But he believed in endurance, I would say. And this is what makes him so dear to me.
Boris, I know you are very keen on works that can transmit some kind of empathy and also a relationship to images. And I mean, really, for me, this movie is very special because of its, it's so sovereign kind of tone that it really doesn't need certain kind of images that you would expect in a literature adaptation that might want to go on the festival circuit. And it's a very kind of, I mean, it has something of a resistance in its own style. How did you read the filmic aspect?
Yes, I would agree with you that I think it's very important question of resistance in contemporary cinema is not following some fashion, because actually what for me is like maybe one of the most important things is cinema, when you see the film which has its own voice, its own style, and which is connected to the material. And that's what we see in this film. So thank you so much for this film. And I don't know. Actually, I was obsessed. I watched the film second time now. I was first time when I watched the film, I was obsessed with that shot when the main character Nicolas was teaching lecture, and we see this a lot of small laptops with students who are typing, and because actually I think it's sort of leitmotif for me because we always, a few times we see Nicolas looking from the window, and like he's like looking to the world as we, like me, you, all of us, like watching cinema at the same time, and it's sort of like got in my head this picture of Nicolas always watching to the window to how life passes, and and the way actually the nature is shot in this film, I think it's very important because it adds to this dimension. But I'm sorry, just to change a bit subject, just to return for a moment to Chekhov. What I think is interesting that in the short novel by Chekhov, actually what I like also very much about the film, that the film is also very close to the spirit of Chekhov. Of course, it's adaptation, of course, like in contemporary time, but at the same time, I think you deleted one aspect from Chekhov, which made film for me more, existential and actually more melancholic, maybe, because in Chekhov there was one important aspect that the main character, he was as important and famous as in the film, but at the same time he struggled because of money. He was poor, and like his wife, she was always attacking him that he doesn't have money to pay for his family, for his children, for the servants. And actually I think it was important and sort of autobiographical for Chekhov as well, because when he was like young, he really struggled a lot. And I think it makes sense in contemporary world, actually, because we know a lot of directors. I don't talk about even critics, but I mean we know a lot of like wonderful directors who really, or writers or artists who really struggle for their life, like it was like in Chekhov book, or in Chekhov like in Chekhov book, or in his life. But yes, but in this film we are just alone with this approaching death. And yes, actually that makes the film a bit more, melancholic for me, existential.
Do you want to respond to?
Yes, the short, the novella, the short story is puts a lot of importance on his life at university also, but I preferred to set aside everything that was not connected to his dying and his excuse my English, his incapacity to alors pour les francophones, son incapacité à guérir la personne qu'il aime le plus au monde. The fact that he is not capable to cure, to heal, merci, to heal the person that is most important in his life. So everything in the film now revolves on these two things. The rest, to me, well, of course, it's terrible to say, well, it's anecdote, because it's Chekhovian anecdote. I should have kept it, but I preferred to, yes.
Yeah, I'm really curious to your reactions to the movie as well. And I mean, Alfred Behrens is, for one part, a filmmaker and author as well, and I think literature has quite an important part in your work and life, and maybe you could reflect a bit on how literature and film can connect, and whether there's a resistance actually in connecting them.
I'll try. It's difficult. I'm grateful because I saw a very beautiful film, and you took me on a journey, and it was a journey through a brilliant and Chekhovian mind, and so that was an experience, and I would like to take up one word you said, that was endurance, and I think that is what we need. We had to resist, or we have to resist, or me personally, I had to start to resist when I was very young. That was in '68, you know, that year. And we still have to resist, and we need a lot of endurance. And your film, your movie gave me more sort of more battery power to go on and endure and resist. It's our daily work. And apart from that, I feel quite humble. I find it very difficult to say something after that brilliant work which you gave us.
Daniel Hösel, I gather from your work. I mean, obviously that's just name dropping, but you've learned by Ulrich Seidel. I'll say you may object, you may resist.
I was employed, so there, but it's a different job.
Maybe you didn't learn anything. And and from what I understand, part of your looking onto making films. I mean, obviously you're maybe coming from a different system, a different background, but one part of making films is about finding an alternative way of making films, and that might be form of resistance. Is that something you could elaborate on?
So first, also, I mean, I can only agree. It was very nice to see a protagonist resisting the jadedness of this environment, and then and especially the ending is still resonating, and made me think. And I think what's important, first of all, when I try to make a film, is that you show something that makes you think, but also then the vector or the force that you when you leave the audience behind is what I try, that the audience leaves the cinema with maybe with the possibility of better change, that with the better battery, that you leave with better battery power, even if maybe the next day you realize, oh, there is no battery power, but at least you've tried, and that's what we also try when we make films. And then, of course, I mean, the way we make films, it's a collective filmmaking, and so we start with casting, and so we don't have a screenplay, and we have big troubles to finance a film, because nobody trusts you without a screenplay. Even if we already made a few films, and I'm not the first one. Like, there are people like Ulrich Seidel or Mike Lee who have a very similar approach. We have a basic we have a cast, we have characters, we have a background, biographies by the actors and non-actors, and with this information we create a narrative, and then we do the rehearsals, and in the rehearsals we write down all dialogue, and we have a completely normal shooting procedure, and there is nothing wrong. But it's I mean, it's very efficient. It has nothing to do with Chekhov.
Why not?
Yeah, I mean, because of course with Chekhov you have a literature in advance that you try to depict, or that you and there would be many different approaches to how to do that. Michael Haneke does the same, and I think he does it in a very interesting way, in a very specific way when he does Kafka. Because also I think he makes you think. He tries to he tries to recreate the book as good as possible. He doesn't change. So not what Frank Castorf does at the Volksbühne with Ibsen, which I also like. But then what's important that you leave, and that in our context, not Haneke maybe, that you leave the cinema, and that you have the chance also to reload your batteries. That's what we are trying, even if it might be a mirage. Ich versuch's, ja.
So we've seen not only an adaptation, but also translation into a different culture. How important was it to inject some parts of the culture of Quebec into the movie?
There was no particular effort to do so. Of course, some references are very local, but it wasn't a concern at all. But I'd like to go back to the idea of resistance and of the idea of adapting a literary work and the link we have to keep with works of the past in literature, in cinema, in music. It seems to me that I live in a society that has cut a lot of ties with the past. We always say in Quebec that le passé est un fardeau. The past is a burden. I think exactly the contrary. I think that the past is at our mercy, that we are responsible to keep a link with the past, with past cultures, and with masters of the past. So to me, the task of adapting a novel and to go back to masters of the past is an act of resistance. I refuse to be submitted to the dictatorship of the present. And to me, this is extremely important. We live in a sort of fuite en avant. Quelqu'un peut m'aider? Yeah, kind of an escape forward where we close our eyes, run as fast as we can, and see where we get. To me, a proper life cannot be lived if there is not an equilibrium between conceptions of the future and the relationship with the past. But all of contemporary culture is cutting. Ask your adolescent, your teenagers. All of contemporary culture is conducting us to cut ties with the past, to be closed in an eternal present. So, to me, the relationship with literature was very, very important as an act of resistance.
You want to respond? Could you? I'm sorry, we only have 2 microphones up here for the moment.
So I would like to respond and then ask one question. The founder of Russian Cinematheque, of Russian Film Museum, and the director of Russian Film Museum, Naum Kleiman, who will get the Golden Camera here in Berlinale in the next few days, maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow. He taught me maybe the most important lesson about cinema and art in general. He told me once, and he's always repeating it. I mean, it's a very simple thing, but I think it's very important. He told me that there is no such thing as progress in art, because like what Chekhov wrote 100 years ago is as contemporary as what happens nowadays. So we can say that like what happens nowadays is better. There is no such comparison, so there is no such thing as progress. I think it's very important, and that's what I also like see and like in your film, because you deal with modernity, with contemporary time, and also you deal with Chekhov, and also you put the music of Shostakovich, another story actually of resistance, and a very tragic story. And my question actually was about, if I remember correct, Marina Tsvetaeva, Russian poet, once she wrote that it's very hard to translate a poem from one language to another one, and you need, if you would like to do that, you need to find 2 main lines in the poem and to translate them as precise as it possible, and then you do the rest of the poem. So could I ask you if you have because you're also doing actually this job of translation. You translate, but it's even more complicated because you translate from one language, from literature to cinema. Based on your experience working with Chekhov, and actually it's not only, I think, because I also felt this Chekhovian mood from his other books, from Uncle Vanya also I felt like. And what's your 2 lines?
The first one is alors tu ne viendras pas à mon enterrement. So you will not come to my funeral. I remember when I first read that short story, I was, I think, 18 or 19 years old, and I started crying. So that's certainly the first one. There's so much to like. And the other is tout va bien. Everything is going to be all right. There is such beauty in Chekhov. It's the first time I did a literary adaptation, and to me, I have the feeling I want to do more and more, because I can never, as a script writer, attain the complexity and the depth that Chekhov gives his characters. Working with that wonderful short story, or novella, it's actually a long short story, is to marvel at Chekhov's economy as a writer. He's so economical. At the same time, you know everything, all the contradictions, and this is so. Yes, two phrases, but a whole outlook on life, certainly. And I've been a reader of Chekhov all my life, and voilà.
And Bernard Aymon has also done a movie about translating poems, and it wasn't the first time you thought about how it can affect a life to translate, I mean, this kind of language that is maybe not translatable.
Yes, my last film was about the poetry of Stakura, the Polish poet, and no literature. Here I'm going to make a confession. I've been a filmmaker for a long part of my life, but I think that literature is my true country. I shouldn't say that here. But certainly it's wonderful working with a text of that depth and that complexity and that economy.
You talked about, I mean, as soon as you want to join in, you're very welcome to do. Oh, there's one. There's the microphone here. Here.
Yeah, to come as well back to the expression of resistance. I want to try to resist a little bit the temptation to be anti-modern in a too easy way. I'd say that definitely I understand why you said, first of all, congratulations to this beautiful film. I like the film very much. But you said that we are obsessed with future and contemporary times. We are forgetting the past. I think there are a lot of reasons, at least when you're from Europe, maybe not from Canada, to say we are obsessed with the past. And I don't just mean that we have a lot of, in Germany, very good reasons to remember the 20th century. I mean as well, we have a general memorial culture. We have the temptation to preserve all architecture of the last 100 years. It's not possible to build a new Vatican church, for example, because of course there's a great Renaissance building, but maybe it would be a statement of our time to do something like this. We are skeptic towards a lot of things, towards progress, towards I could mention a lot, but I don't want to be too long here. And so it might be that in cinema is an art which is not just an art like literature. It is a technical art, and there might be no progress in art, but there's a progress in technique. So cinema, of course, is changing a lot. And I would like to ask you specifically for your film. Do you really think that your film is something like a work of art which is sticking to the past and which is not looking into the future? So okay, so just turn your look around into the future, where is, in your opinion, or where did you want to resist this temptation of the past?
Well, of course, this is the first film I've shot digitally. And the snow at the end is artificial. So obviously I'm not such of a passéiste. And yes, of course, yes, of course, you're right. There can be such a thing as an obsession with the past. But what I'm trying to say is that I'm just trying to fight the reverse obsession. And as the same way I agree with the phrase that there is no progress in art. Art is about life. Life changes. There's not much progress in life, I must say, but there's change. And of course, art must talk about that change, register it. Voilà.
May I just add one question? What would Chekhov do if he would be alive today? Would he write the same stories? I doubt it. He would at least write different stories, or maybe do cinema, or maybe television series. You never know.
Possibly. I hope for him that he wouldn't work in television. And certainly he would be full of wonder at what modern medicine offers. But also probably very skeptical at what medical practice has become.
If we talk about the past and does play a role, you talked about one part of trying to cut ties to the with the past, but as well there's a very fond mechanism of using the past for as a background, or using the past like you have a lot of adaptations that, I mean, the Bester adaptation system where you need a story that might be pretty recent, but you might also have, especially in children's films, you have a lot of times adaptations of classical or semi-classical works of art. So there might be some kind of different aspects of how to take something out of the past and why. So it's not as clear cut where to put the line, or what use of the past can be useful for contemporary art. That was actually no question. Sorry. But if there are any, please feel welcome. Is there one? No? Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about filmmaking, because we have 3 filmmakers here, and I'm really curious. I mean, I read a very fascinating interview with Alfred Behrens in Black Box a few years ago. I'm not sure exactly when it was, and you talked about teaching students and about the need to teach students who want to make movies to resist the urge to go into the system of especially writing this kind of prose that is necessary to get funding, and these kind of texts that no one cares for but everybody has to write, and a kind of mechanism that ingrains you into the system. And I'm curious how this kind of resistance can show in what you teach.
It's really funny in a way. You're talking about Antragsprosa, and I don't know how to translate that into English.
Does someone know?
But it's you know this probably. We have to write not only scripts, screenplays, but we have to write, why do I want to make this movie? Where do I want to show this movie? How many million people will see my film, and so on and so on and so on. Actually, just 2 days ago, I almost decided I will do a seminar on Antragsprosa. But that is sort of a resistance beneath underground acting, because it has become very difficult in this country to make movies that try to get at something like truth or reality, or because our public radio or public television is making it very, very difficult to make anything which is not mainstream, and they are acting against. I have to translate it from German into English. They are acting against the rules that were laid down in Rundfunkstaatsverträgen and broadcasting acts, like, you know, the BBC was the model for German public radio and television, but we don't have. They are supposed to cater for something like Kulturauftrag. They have to cater for culture. They have to cater for Gesellschaftsauftrag. They have to cater for making program that is relevant for the society. They have to cater for Integrationsauftrag, and we need this now more than before, because our society is exploding. And this is what we really have to fight against, what we have to resist against. So it's a big job, and I'm a small old man.
You just talked about one key word, the Auftrag. It's some, I don't know the exact word, but it's something like a responsibility. So it's kind of, and that was a key word also in what I read from your book. There's one part of wanting to have rights, and one other part that there are responsibilities that come with it, that you have to stand in for them, and that you cannot ask for having everything given to you and not give anything back. So I gather there's some kind of link to find there.
In Quebec, in Canada in general, film is in very, very large part financed by the state. And what is strange is that the state financing institutions make it sometimes pretty difficult to do films who are not commercial. Whereas it seemed to me that, of course, this is I shouldn't generalize, but it is. There's a commercial model that is dominant, and it's pretty hard to transgress.
Good news, you can, because you just have to do it. Nowadays, if you don't stick to the rules, you just don't do it, you know. And then and there is funding, and you have to go your own ways. If you have something to say, you have to do it. Don't complain about the system. Change the system by doing something that makes the system rethink. And this is what we are doing. And it's and I'm of course not the first one who shoots film in a different way, you know. What? Yes. It's very easy. It's very important. Don't write a screenplay. You know, I am not a guy. I'm not a literature guy. I'm a guy of the image. So I just start. I trust the actors. I trust the biography, and we create a narrative. And indeed, I am influenced by the history of storytelling. You know, to change this, you have to start doing it and not only talk about it. And if with a seminar, it's already quite a nice approach, you know. But a camera is very simple to acquire nowadays, and it's a camera can be a gun.
I use this one and 10 other small ones to make my last film. So, but this is okay. I made my last film without a script, without a screenplay. But I would like to answer to what you said, because I think, but I'm speaking now only about this country, but what you said rang a bell. We had a situation where we could make, or where we had to make movies. No, where we could make movies with state money or public broadcasting money. But this country has been invaded totally by market fundamentalism. And I guess that's that is perhaps the same in Canada, I don't know. I know that it's the same in the States, and I know that there are economists and Nobel Prize winning economists who said that the States are not a democracy anymore, but a plutocracy. And we all know, we can break it down to this 1% and 99% story, which we all know. Our chancellor, who has a beautiful bunker by the river, believes in marktkonforme Demokratie. She believes in a democracy that has to conform to the markets. I love it that there are now some Greeks who tell her that there is another way to look at things. And I hope she will be able. She's a Swabian housewife, you know, like her Schäuble, her finance minister. They want to kaputt sparen, this country, but I think the Greeks will teach them a lesson. So, a Russian.
I mean, it's very hard to talk, about the situation in my country. Actually, it's also a question of resistance, but you share your experience as filmmakers, and actually I feel myself like very shy being together with such serious people as you are, because, no, really, because I'm just trying to do some film criticism, and it gets worse and worse, and especially now. When I was preparing to this resistance roundtable, I remembered that André Bazin, one of the greatest film critics in the world, please correct me if I'm wrong, he started his work in the newspaper called Combat, the Combat, which was published by resistance forces during the war, during the occupation of France. And that's really great. Why I remember that now? Because I don't know. I think in Russia it's a bit different, and in Europe, like cultural journalism was decaying all these years, but especially the last year, because like the last year Russia lives in the state of war. The society lives in the state of war with Ukraine, the state of war with Europe. And it's quite horrible experience to live in the society which is obsessed with idea of war. And you could see that like all cultural, people like die every day. They always die every day, but because of the war, and the war which happens like nowadays very close to us. And of course everyone lost the interest to what happens like in Berlin Film Festival, or okay, Berlin like at least has like Terence Malick or Werner Herzog films, but for example about Rotterdam, nobody really even follows what happens there. And I could understand, but I also should resist, because I think that it's also important. And I have my friends from Kiev who actually participated in Maidan Revolution, then were like a bit disappointed that like lost some illusions, but still were supporting that. And they were keeping doing film screenings and film discussions after the films, even in the days of revolution. But they were not, they were really politically involved. They were not, like these people who tries to keep the real world aside. They were really like, they were spending times in Maidan, for example, in the revolution, and then in the evening talking about cinema. And I think this kind of resistance, especially for me, because of this political situation nowadays, is quite important. And if they were finding a page about cinema during the Great War, like the Second World War, maybe it's still there is some sense to work on nowadays. Don't know.
Do you want to react to that, Daniel?
yeah, I mean, it's indeed very different in every country. I mean, if you're from Ghana, it will be very hard for you to make a film. Indeed, I'm very privileged and lucky that I'm in Austria, where we have an art fund that also supports this type of filmmaking. And I'm not saying that I want to make films without money. I want big money, and I want to pay everybody in a reasonable, in a fair wages, right? Absolutely. And that's what we do because it's an association, and everybody gets paid the same amount of money every. So I get 70 euros a day, and the chef and the driver and every actor 70 euro a day, and also because of our very restricted budget, because we only get it from the art department. And of course, this is why I can't afford to go to the dentist, you know. But it doesn't look so bad. So. But I think it's better to even when I smile, you don't see my bad teeth, you know.
I think that the question of the means of production is a very, very important question, and things have changed very rapidly in the last years. It is now possible to shoot images which will look good on a very big screen with a $2,000 camera. This is remarkable. It changes everything. It makes many things possible. I've been following the work of Alain Cavalier for years and years. I absolutely love his work. And when I watch his old films, I certainly wish he had the cameras we have today. But one of the problems with that accessibility to very powerful tools is that anybody can say anything. And to my mind, that's exactly what happens.
Why would that be a bad thing?
Well, there are so many bad films.
But why do you care?
Oh,
there are a lot of bad films that have great big budgets.
no, of course. But the small means more and more and more and more films. I see teenagers around me, and you have to learn how to make these things. The facility which you can use the new means is a kind of lie. Anybody can make an image by pressing a button, an image that will look good on a screen this big. But the point is that you have to think about images. You have to have seen films. You have to have read. You have to know painting. And
no, you don't. You just learn it by doing, and you fake it till you make it. and it's open for everybody. It's very democratic. It must be open. Why do I have to know Rembrandt? Why would anybody from, I don't know, why would somebody from Democratic Republic of Congo have to know that? They have problems and they want to make a point and show a film. And if something is pointless, then it falls to the gutter. And there is curatorship at some festivals that show important movies, like in Rotterdam or elsewhere, you know. So I don't agree.
There's a question in the public or a comment.
Yeah, I'd like to comment a little. I mean, when you were saying, Bernard, that everybody can make an image, we have maybe experienced here 300 images blitzing from right and left here all the time. I mean, there's something about that. Are you making a film here or something about this? That's just a comment. But my main question to you is about nihilism, about the cynicism in the content of your film. Do you think there is a limit in this kind of film about the brain, the success of the brain for some years, of the protagonist, and the failure of the family on the other side, that there is a limit to knowledge? Some place in there you are going into the cynical or the distance to life, to love, and then you fail. I mean, do you think there is a limit of obtaining knowledge? Is that some of your message? I mean, that's maybe a problem in the society today, that people are discussing and getting more and more knowledge and losing some of the heart. Yeah? Maybe I'm just like a comment on that topic.
One of the things that is remarkable about Chekhov is, at the same time, because of his irony, he knows men and women, but at the same time he never loses compassion. And it is this mixture of knowledge and compassion that keeps his work so important for us today. And this mixture of knowledge of compassion is important for us also, I think.
But they can't split and then you are lost. Huh? You only end up with the brain. Huh? That's for a lot of people, I think, today. The cynicism you talk about, huh? I mean, the cynicism you're describing, I mean. That the lover of the daughter, for example, that guy.
There's a question or a comment here.
I'd just like to invite Bernard to reflect on the idea of a national cinema as a form of resistance, because I know from your book that it's important to you that your films are made in Quebec, and all your stories are set in Quebec. You made a point, I think, once when you at Cannes about the importance of the Quebecois language in your films. And do you see that as an act of resistance? And if so, is Chekhov a change of heart in some way?
No, it isn't. The movie Chekhov is just an act of the heart. But actually, this is the least Québécois of all my films. The language used in the film is the language of the petite bourgeoisie, the educated people. And it's closer to the French that is spoken in France. But in all my other movies, the language is closer to street language in Montreal. Not in all my movies, but in many. So it's not a change of heart. But I think that this idea of national cinema is very important. And when you talked about the filmmaker in Congo not having to know Rembrandt, I agree wholeheartedly. The things I said about the links with past culture is because I work inside Occidental culture. But outside, the reality is outside, and now we have films coming from all parts of the world that are an act of resistance against the standardized format of American cinema. And this is wonderful. And many of these films are made with the means you talk about, with very, very little. And this is wonderful for me. And it's to me it's very important. But you're right. This film is probably the least Québécois of all my films.
You talk about standardization and American cinema, but I mean there are many other forms of standardization of cinema, and it doesn't have to come from the US. And I think the standardization that, for example, would be in German cinema wouldn't be an American standardization. It would be kind of trying to find a middle ground that won't hurt anyone, and don't necessarily means that you have a certain plot structure or a certain characters that will reflect on be able where you can project yourself very easily because their values are so general. I mean, you talk about one specific form of resistance and working with the past, but I'm sure there are so many other forms of making cinema in here even. Where the form of resistance can be a different one, and it doesn't. I mean, you talked about iconoclasm of how to work with images, maybe with images against with maybe the over the downpour of images, and use that downpour and
as the second film of the first night of the Critics Week showed.
That's one, or tomorrow's evening is going to go in that same direction. Yeah.
You know, I agree with you totally. I think, for instance, probably the best Quebec filmmaker, the most important to me, is not very well known outside our country. His name is Robert Morin. He works. He did films with large budgets, but they're not his best films. But he made more than 20 films with $50. And these films are his absolute best films. He has a totally independent voice, He's worked in video most of his life. Actually, the films that he shot on film stock are less good because too many people involved, absolutely. But his films, he has such a absolutely personal voice. I recommend you, Robert Morin to you. He's he's an extraordinary critic of the culture in our society, and his filmmaking is unique, and it's done with no money.
Daniel, yeah.
And also, I really like it if this is possible. I just want to mention Gus Van Sant, who is able to do both in a way. Yeah, he makes Jerry and he makes Milk, and he reaches both sides. I mean, this is an amazing capacity also as a filmmaker to be able to do that. Yeah. I mean, so far the dentist.
I was just wondering, what is there a link between the money you receive and the freedom to express yourself? Do you see do you see that link? Because you're talking about budgets, and the bigger budgets meaning the films getting worse. There's
not a causal relationship.
But there might be a part, or
no. When I have a bigger budget, I can buy more time. And you all know the name of the director who said, "Time is gold in filmmaking." Kubrick said so. And when I have a small budget, I can't buy as much time. So I think production is not the big problem anymore. That was our big problem before the digital filmmaking. Now, in my opinion, the problem is distribution, because there are so many films being made, and they all have to go to the same festivals and to the same cinemas and so on. So,
but there's also an explosion of film festivals. So, what is the problem of distribution? What do you think? The attention span, or what is?
No, not the attention span. It's this is roughly not exactly the right numbers, but I remember reading in the New York Times about 2 years ago that Sundance had 20 years ago 200 entries, and they elected or selected 45 films. Now they have 4,399 entries, and they showed 250 films. So, and I believe it's the same with Berlinale, and that in fact, I believe, means that in the end that you can't recoup the money you put into the production, and we all have bad teeth.
Yeah, I mean, at Sundance, my experience at Sundance, by the way, just to say something very specific, was, I mean, they show 11 international movies, okay, and then you have a big. You are very lucky that you have a big audience, and it travels very well if you are in the roulette, okay, to be shown at Sundance. And they are really careful people. Even you might agree with their agenda or not, and they really care about the films. I mean, the festival director knew the film, and it's not just he watched 10 minutes out of it. And whereas Berlinale really is just a I don't know what to call it, big swamp of inconsistency, in my opinion. And but it's I wanted to go back to one thing that made me think before, this thought of national cinema. If I would just think of an Austrian national cinema, it would be very troubling, I think, if I would try to do that. And I would really I hope that this movement is not going to start in Austria, also because of historical reasons. And as the optimist, I mean, I just see our reality, and this is why I think almost 50% of our last film was shot in English. Of course, if we are a German-speaking country, but we are sitting here speaking English because we are, in the meantime, indeed globalize the world, and even if it's very hard to get to our viewer, I mean, there is a chance that we have a viewer if you are selected and if you don't fall through the gutter. I have made 10 films before that have never been selected to any festival. So at some point it happened.
I have an audience question. I'm wondering, when we were talking or thinking about, I'm sitting here, when we were thinking about how films are traveling, Bernard, you worked as an anthropologist as well before. So I was wondering, your film is set in a very bourgeois milieu, I would say. And I also know one of the films of Daniel, Soldat Janet, he did before. Now he's working on a new film, and I think it's finished by now. And there was also one of the main characters was actually a very bourgeois lady from Austria, and there's like a theory we can relate to people that are a bit similar to us, right? So sometimes that works. Please resist my thesis if it's wrong. But many people who define the value of cultural products or films or works of art are situated in a very bourgeois milieu, I would say. So would you say it helps to locate your film in such a milieu?
No, not at all. Actually, I think the majority of my films take place in working class and use Québécois language. And to me, this is very important. There's a link with that culture, which is very important to me. And well, who knows? Maybe this film is going to be to sell better than the others. But it was certainly not my intention. It was just a matter of sticking to the story by Chekhov. And but no, it is very important to me to go back to well, to actual living conditions in the actual world.
So maybe to come to a kind of note, maybe each of you could find a coin a phrase or something that where could the resistance lead us? Do you have a projection for your own resistance?
Well, to the point we're at in the history of humanity, I think that the most optimistic objective that resistance can give is just survival.
We all know that Karl Marx said to his wife, Jenny von Westphalen, "It's the economy, stupid." So I think we have to make films against the international finance industry. It's good to have a big enemy, so that could take us 20 or 30 years, but I think it's really what we should do, because they, I think Marx said they dispossessed us. You have a French word, depossedieren. The dispossessed. We as artists and filmmakers are the dispossessed, and the bankers and the what do they call themselves? Well, you know what I'm talking about. They are them and we are us, and they are 1% and we are 99%. And I think we should make 99 movies to kick them.
I mean, a movie can be a gun, and and we try to shoot them, you know,
Yes.
the movies and the bankers, and that's it. Another thing about Quebec, you know, when I go to Quebec, I always have a hard time resisting pastrami at Schwartz's Deli, and this is it.
But just to continue your remark, I know that in Berlin last year was retrospective of Želimir Žilnik, Yugoslavian and Serbian director. Like Zelimir Zilnik is written with 2Z. And in one of his best films, he ends the film with the question, with title card, film weapon or shit. And actually he concluded that film is shit, because in that film it was social film where he tried to find a way to help homeless people in communist Yugoslavia. And he brought them to his flat. He told to his wife that the state gave them the flat to Zilnik and his wife, and these 6 homeless people, they have no place to live. So these 6 people will live with them and their small child. Of course, like next week after the film was shot, the wife left Zilnik. She divorced with him. And yes, and he finished the film and he wrote that yes, film weapon is shit. But he decided that film is shit, but he continued to make films, and he's still doing films about the most marginalized people, to help them, not to help them, to fight with them together. And I think it's a good example of resistance as well.
Thank you. So I'll thank you all thank you very much for your film, and we'll try to resist a little more in the coming days, and we'll try to resist right now the urge to keep talking. So we'll resist tomorrow the urge to not watch romantic comedies, and we'll just watch them and have a lot of fun doing so, and talk about desire and lust. And yeah, join us tomorrow at 6 p.m. already with the first part for Don't Go Breaking My Heart by Johnny Toe, and the second part at 8:30, which is a sequel that works by itself also if you can't join us at 6. So thank you very much. Thank you.